Some faces get permanently etched into our minds, and we don't even know why. There's nothing particularly special about them, but the strange thing is, we don't realize a face has been stored in our memory until it suddenly appears in front of us again. There was no real reason to remember Greg. He wasn't a star student, nor was he talented in any sport. We weren't even friends. In fact, he didn't seem to have any friends at all. Back in school, I only remember seeing him wandering around with a sad expression on his face. That's the only impression of him that remained with me. And after 15 years one morning, I suddenly saw him walking toward me, and his image flashed instantly in my mind. Oh, that's Greg. In fact, I should have just kept walking, or at most, exchanged a few words and gone on my way. But I didn't. I stopped him. Is your name Miller? Actually, my job was that of a traveling salesman, so talking to strangers was a habit. I spent my days chatting with unknown people to get my work done. But at that moment, my question didn't have any such motive. Maybe if he had just said no, I would have apologized and kept walking. He hesitated a bit and said, "Yeah, my name is Miller, but I don't recognize you." "I was in school with you," I said, and to reassure him, I mentioned the names of some of our classmates. He frowned slightly for a moment, deep in thought, and then suddenly a spark lit up his face. He remembered me. "Oh, you're John." "John, no." "What do you mean?" "Haha, John Davis." "You got it right." "Yeah, Davis," he laughed. "So much time has passed, hasn't it?" 15 years, he said, coming out of his thoughts. "Come on, let's grab some coffee." He seemed happy to meet me. "And your memory is really impressive, to recognize me so clearly after all these years." We went to a nearby coffee shop. It was crowded, yet no one seemed to be paying attention to anyone else. There was a kind of solitude even within the noise. We sat at a table waiting for our coffees, and after all these years, I was looking at Greg closely. He was about my age, around 30, but he looked much older. His body was large but flabby, with thinning hair that made his forehead look bigger. He seemed to have the habit of wiping sweat from his forehead often. Every 2 minutes, he'd dab his neck, forehead, and face with a bright handkerchief. "So how's everything going?" he asked as the coffees arrived. "Oh, like a bee flitting from here to there. I'm a traveling salesman here today, 100 miles away tomorrow. So it's really a matter of chance that we met today. What about you? Do you live here?" "I'm fine," he said, pausing for a moment. "You must be staying at a hotel, right?" "Yeah, but I'll be leaving soon." "How many more days here?" "At most 2. "Then why don't you come stay with me at my place?" I could already picture my daily routine: morning meetings, lunch after 2, an evening nap, some walking around afterward, and sometimes returning at 9, sometimes 10 at night. At the hotel, this worked just fine. I was still thinking about it when he asked, "What's the matter?" "Look, I don't want to trouble you unnecessarily." "What trouble? I live alone." "Alone?" I said in surprise. "What about your marriage?" Shaking his head, he replied, "I'm single. That's why I'm asking you to come. I'll have company for 2 days." There was no doubt he was speaking sincerely. His tone made it clear he really needed someone's company. But I wasn't sure if I could actually stay with him. I barely knew him. Even in childhood, I had never spoken to him. I was still thinking when he said, "John, please, if possible." I smiled slightly and said, "All right. Give me your address. After my morning meeting, I'll grab my suitcase and come straight to your house." "All right, I'll be waiting for you." I reached the address Greg had given me. It was a grand mansion, like an old estate. Memories of school days came back, of Greg's sad, silent demeanor. Back then, no one could have imagined he would own such a palatial home. "Has this always been your house?" I asked, looking around. "Yeah," he replied, "I was adopted here. But come on, dinner is ready. Let's eat first, then talk." The food was laid out in the middle of the dining table, and we could help ourselves to whatever we wanted. The rest of the house was silent, no signs of activity. It seemed only the necessary rooms were cleaned. Later, I learned that apart from a housekeeper who came morning and cook who came only once in the morning. No one else ever visited. They came, did their work, and left. After eating, we went into the adjoining room. The furniture was old-fashioned but comfortable. A thin layer of dust coated everything. It looked like the room was rarely used. I chose a chair that seemed clean and sat down. Greg entered with a long cigarette. He noticed me looking around the room. Placing a tray in front of me, he said, "This place must seem strange to you, right?" "Yeah, I don't mean to criticize, but..." I stopped mid-sentence. "This big house, the lack of people, my loneliness, the mess, all of this is bothering you, isn't it?" I continued, "Yeah, I'm a little surprised. Normally, I'm not curious about other people's secrets or stories, but Greg's transformation, this grand house, the strange atmosphere, the loneliness, it's made me curious." Then Greg began in a low voice. I must have been about 5.5 years old when my family gave me away for adoption. To tell the truth, they were distant relatives, but I learned that much later. At the time, I was suddenly taken from my home and brought here. His voice grew heavy. I don't think anyone thought about how I felt. I was taken from my parents and siblings and left in this vast mansion. I think that event had a terrible impact on my mind, and maybe that's why I am the way I am, strange, quiet. My family must have been poor, so they sold me. Yes, that must be it. There was bitterness in his tone. My aunt insisted I be brought here, so I began calling my adoptive parents uncle and aunt. My uncle never cared for me. From the first day, he kept his distance. He never spoke kindly to me, nor did he expect any affection from me. If my aunt were alive, things might have been different, but fate didn't allow it. Within 3 or 4 years of my arrival, she died. While she lived, she loved me like a son. After she died, everything ended. The last bit of love in my life was gone. My uncle was an old-fashioned man, the kind who never broke a promise. On her deathbed, he promised my aunt he would never let me lack for anything, and he kept that promise. He made sure I never went without food, clothes, or shelter. Greg's words carried a deeper meaning. His face hardened as he spoke. "John, he treated me like an animal, 2 sets of clothes a year, 2 meals a day, a place to sleep at night, and nothing more. Every day he would ask the same question, 'Greg, are you all right?' Same question, same dry tone. He never inquired about my studies or my life. I was only 8 years old. He didn't love me, didn't expect anything from me, and didn't even want any connection with me. There was a solid iron wall between us that never broke. When I finished my high school exams that morning too, he had asked, 'Greg, are you all right?' In the afternoon, I nervously went to his room. I still remember that day clearly. I asked him whether I should enroll in college. He simply asked, 'How much money do you need?' That question drained all my joy in an instant. Still, I stayed in the house and went to college, but I couldn't focus on anything. I didn't even know who or what I was doing it for. My trust in people had been destroyed since childhood, and my heart was rotting inside. After graduation, I wondered what to do next. I thought, now that I'm an adult, I can talk to my uncle openly. One afternoon, I went to his room. He was sitting in his easy chair, reading old papers. When he heard me, he looked up, our first eye contact in a long time. His eyes saw me like a stranger. Then he said, "Greg, since you've come, let me tell you, you were brought into this house against my wishes. You know by now we share no bond. When my wife was dying, she made me promise never to let you lack for anything. So as long as you live here, you'll have food, clothing, and a place to stay. That's my only responsibility. Whatever you want to do or say doesn't concern me." And with that, he put his glasses back on and returned to reading. You can't imagine how terrible I felt. I was furious at him and ashamed of myself. I had hopes, I wanted to do something, but instead, I left a note and walked out of the house. I swore never to return. Greg was silent for a while, then spoke softly, but I came back. That alone should tell you what must have happened to me. I turned my eyes away. His face was not one to look at then. I don't know whether my uncle even noticed I had left or returned. He was the same as before. The same morning meeting, the same question. "Greg, are you all right?" I can't describe how broken I was inside, but I had no choice. I kept enduring it silently. This meaningless life, no work, no responsibility, and no real place in the house. 2 years later, I met Susan. She worked at the local library. I started going there to pass the time, spending entire days reading. She thought I was studious and intelligent, and she fell in love with me. We got to know each other, and eventually I proposed. One day I brought her home to meet my uncle. That was my biggest mistake, John. I guess I still didn't really know my uncle. I still clung to the false hope that maybe he would change. But within 15 minutes, everything was over. Susan left without looking at me, and I never went back to that library. I felt sympathy for Greg. None of this was his fault. Every time it seemed life might change for him, it didn't. Still, he seemed somewhat relieved after telling me all this. 6 months ago, my uncle had a paralytic stroke and died within a month. Even on his deathbed, he never spoke openly with me. When he died, all his wealth came to me. And honestly, my first thought was to sell everything and leave this town. But 5 days after his death, his lawyer came and showed me his will. I inherited the property on one condition, that I must live in this mansion for the rest of my life. If I ever left permanently, everything would go to a trust, and the trust keeps a close eye on me. They would love to claim such a large estate. So I am trapped here forever. I can go away for a few days, but I must always return. I interrupted. All right, that's all in the past. But how long will you live like this? Even if you have to stay here for life, you can't live like a hermit. Why not have a few people live here with you? As soon as I said that, his face changed color, nearly turned pale. His eyes darted around the room. He kept wiping his face with the red handkerchief. "John," he said in a low voice, "no one wants to live in this house. I even offered higher wages, but it made no difference." His words took a new turn. The mansion suddenly seemed much gloomier. I didn't yet understand the reason, but I wanted to. "What, are they afraid?" "Afraid of what?" "Have you ever asked them?" He shook his head wearily. Within 25 days of my uncle's death, every servant left, the cooks, gardeners, maids, everyone. They had no ill will toward me, but none would stay here. I didn't think much of it at first. I just thought they were odd. But when I hired new staff, I overheard them talking after 2 days. They were uneasy here, frightened at night, unwilling to go anywhere alone. No matter how much I asked, they couldn't say exactly what scared them. I don't think they were lying. Their fear was nameless, unknown. Maybe they saw or heard something. Eventually, I decided they would only work here in the daytime, and I would spend the rest of the time alone. I hesitated, then asked, "And Greg, how true is this? Have you ever felt anything strange yourself?" He stammered slightly. "No, there's nothing here to be afraid of. Nothing at all." At that moment, I was certain he was lying. He was terrified. After that, we sat in silence. He changed the subject and began asking me questions, but I doubted he was really listening. Around 4 o'clock, we had coffee. Then we both went inside. Evening came, and I prepared to go out for my walk. "I'll be back around 9 or 10, all right?" I said as I left. During my evening meetings, Greg's words kept returning to me. I finished work by around 9:30 p.m. and started back. The night was cool and quiet. I decided to walk instead of taking a taxi. It was true, Greg's life was like a man trapped in a maze, but I had the feeling he had told me only one side of the story. Still, I wasn't here to investigate. I was just a guest. In my mind, I kept picturing that large, silent mansion where two people who despised each other had lived for years. The place was still steeped in poisonous memories, and from the servants' behavior, it was clear that poison still lingered. The mansion stood on the edge of town, with mostly deserted land behind it. Greg lived there alone, and perhaps he was now waiting for me. When I turned the last corner, I saw it. Only the lower part of the mansion was lit. Every downstairs room had its lights on. Against the black sky, the house looked like a blazing furnace. It took Greg a long time to open the door. If he had been waiting for me, Why did he take so long after I knocked? Even when he came to the door, he didn't open it right away. "John," he asked. Only after hearing my voice did he unbolt it. I hope I'm not too late," I asked as I stepped inside. No, not at all," he said, wiping sweat from his face. As soon as I entered, he quickly shut the door. By the time I changed clothes, Greg had set all the food on the table. It was from the morning, reheated with some extra items he'd bought in the evening. Before bed, we sat in the outer room talking for a while. Every window was shut. In that gloomy atmosphere, I began to feel uneasy. I could still imagine the cool, fragrant night outside, so I went to open a window. "John," Greg said suddenly. "What is it?" I didn't understand his tone. "No, leave it closed. Insects come in at night." I sat back down and he continued, "Maybe you think I'm cowardly, but really, insects crawl all over the house at night." I didn't reply. I thought, it's only for a day or two. Then I asked, "So, where's my room?" "It's on the other side. Come, I'll show you." Walking there, I asked, "Wouldn't an upstairs room be better?" Yeah," he faltered, "but I don't go upstairs. One room downstairs is enough for me. No point cleaning more than needed." My room was at the back of the house. Honestly, I wasn't sleepy, but I was tired of Greg's talk. I gave a long yawn and said, "Oh, can I sleep? I'm exhausted." "All right, by the way, what time do you usually wake up?" "After 7, I said, sitting on the bed. I had already decided that once Greg left, I would open all the windows, and I did. Cool, fragrant air filled the room. In front of me stretched an open field, far into the distance. It seemed as though the starlit sky had come down to touch the ground, but there was also a kind of eerie silence. I placed a chair by the window, sat down, and smoked a cigarette, thinking about my meetings and about Greg. Around 10:30 I fell asleep. Sometime in the night I woke. I don't know if it was a dream, a sound, or something else, but one moment I was fast asleep, the next I was wide awake. It took me a while to remember where I was. I wondered what had woken me, some unfamiliar sound or the cold breeze. I didn't know. I lay there for 5 minutes, but couldn't get back to sleep. My eyes went to the window. The moon was still low in the sky, its white light spilling into the room. I felt the urge for another cigarette, so I lit one and stood at the window. Looking out, I noticed something different. The moonlight had turned everything silver, but now there was something else I hadn't seen before. Behind the bungalow, about 20 to 25 feet away, in the middle of a field, stood a scarecrow. It was so sudden, so unexpected that I was startled. For a long time my eyes remained fixed on that still, solitary figure in the moonlight. Instead of a head, there was a white, furry ball with long stick-like arms on either side. Below were tall, pointed legs, and over all of it hung tattered, old clothes. Every now and then, a gust of wind would make it sway slightly. If the wind had been stronger, it would have swayed more vigorously. I don't know why, but I found the whole thing strange. In the solitude of night, the long figure in ragged clothes seemed to be swaying in its own rhythm. Suddenly, I shut the window and pulled myself together, then went back to bed. The next morning, I felt much better. Even Greg seemed to be in a lighter mood. "How did you sleep?" he asked. "Great," I replied. We finished breakfast, I bid him goodbye, and around 9 a.m. I left the house. I had a full day's work ahead. As I had written in my diary, the day went by in meetings. I was so busy that I didn't have time to think about anything else. Around 1 p.m. I was free for a bit. Feeling hot, I took a taxi to Greg's house. Some time went into sorting papers and then lunch. Since I hadn't slept well the previous night, I was feeling drowsy now. My eyes were starting to close. After chatting for 5-10 minutes, I went to my room, planning to sleep until 4 p.m. When I entered, I noticed that the window I had left open at night had been shut by Greg in the morning. I was surprised at his paranoia and opened it again. I looked outside for a while, but the blazing midday sun hurt my eyes, so I couldn't see far. I lay down on the bed, turned to one side, and quickly drifted into a deep sleep. Around 3 p.m. I woke up. For a while, laziness kept me lying there. I lit a cigarette and lay with one hand under my head. Slanting rays of the sun entered through the window, along with the hot air from outside. Something was nagging at my mind. Perhaps that's what had woken me up. Something I should have noticed, but hadn't. It had to do with this place, Greg, his mansion. I got up, walked to the window to put out my cigarette, and the memory of the previous night came rushing back. My body shivered in the harsh afternoon heat. My eyes stayed fixed on the empty field outside. I kept staring at the spot because now the field was bare. The tall, lumpy figure of the scarecrow I'd seen swaying in the moonlight last night was gone. The whole field was deserted. You might think this was a small matter, but who would do something so absurd? And looking at the barren field, I thought, these are not the days to put up a scarecrow. The dry soil didn't have a single green leaf. No, who would put a scarecrow in such wasteland? It felt like a hidden door in my mind had opened, and thoughts came rushing in. Greg's story, the villager's fear, Greg's habit of shutting windows, his repeated questions when I arrived last night, the upper floor that was always locked. Greg was afraid of something, and now I could feel that fear too. I decided I wouldn't stay here much longer. By tomorrow evening, I would leave. Just then, there was a knock at my door. I was startled by Greg's voice. When he came in, I asked, "Who owns the land behind the mansion?" Placing the coffee cup down, he thought for a moment. "As far as I know, it belongs to no single person. About 7 or 8 years ago, a housing society bought it, but no work has been done there yet." I asked, "Has it been given to any farmer?" "Oh yes, there are plowing marks. I heard that 2 or 3 years ago, a farmer leased it, but nothing grew there, and since then it's been lying barren." Then he looked at me and asked, "But why are you asking all this?" I almost told him, but stopped myself. Getting up from the chair, I said, "Nothing. I was just wondering because you don't usually see barren land like that around here." I didn't know why I didn't tell him about the night's experience. Maybe I thought it wasn't right to frighten him with something I wasn't certain about. After all, I was just a guest for 2 days. While changing clothes, my eyes kept drifting to the open field outside. I had an appointment at 8:30 p.m., so I left in the evening. After the meeting, I headed back to Greg's mansion, though honestly, I had no desire to spend another night there. Our friendship wasn't deep enough to justify it. Still, for some reason, I returned. I was beginning to suspect something strange, something unnatural about the mansion and its surroundings. When I arrived, half of the bungalow was lit. The rest was in darkness, especially upstairs rooms. I waited at the door for a while, then knocked. From very close inside, a voice called, Who is it?" It was Greg, but he sounded very nervous. "Greg, it's John," opened the door. When he opened it, his face looked odd, and he was sweating heavily. Wiping his forehead with a handkerchief, he said, "I heard your footsteps, but you didn't speak for a long time." Interrupting, I said, "Oh, I was just standing outside looking around." But seeing his condition, I felt sorry for him. Alone in this empty mansion, keeping the lights on all night, listening for every little sound from outside, what was he so afraid of? Even tonight, hearing footsteps stop outside his door had scared him. He brushed it off. "Come, dinner's ready." At the table, I said, "Greg, my work here is finished, so I'll be leaving tomorrow. Thank you for your hospitality." His mood seemed to change. He didn't talk much during dinner, hardly touched his food. Later, while we were sitting in the outer room, he suddenly asked, "Are you really leaving, John?" "Yes, in fact, I should have left earlier. I have important work left. I thought you'd stay a few more days." "I'm sorry, but I can't. I couldn't keep my curiosity in check any longer." "Greg, I think something is bothering you. I'm not trying to pry into your personal life, but I feel there's a heavy burden on your heart. If you want, I can help." He was silent for a while, and I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice tired and defeated. "John, for a while I thought my servants were lying, but now I'm just like them. I'm afraid of this entire mansion. I don't go upstairs for months. The rooms belong to my uncle. Even downstairs, I live in fear. If you ask me what I'm afraid of, I might not be able to answer. I didn't like the strange turn this was taking. But Greg, fear must have some basis. You must have experienced something. I shouldn't have asked, because lines of fear appeared on his face. John, I'm not brave enough to turn off the lights at night. But what's here that frightens you? And then he broke down like a collapsing building. Yes, he shouted, let whoever wants to hear it. Yes, this mansion is haunted. Every night it becomes haunted. Something hovers around it, trying to get in. I hear rustling footsteps in the courtyard. I know someone is out there, gently pushing on doors and windows, peeking inside. I won't name it, but I know who it is. His bottled-up fear had burst out. Exhausted, Greg covered his face with his hands. Greg, why don't you leave this house? I asked. How can I? I'd lose my claim to it. Don't you have anywhere else to go? No, he said angrily. That's what they wanted. That was their revenge. They donated all their wealth, leaving me nothing but this house, because they knew I couldn't leave it. I'm bound to it. They're still taking revenge on me. If you had married, do you think they would have let me be happy? I don't think so. There was a strange glint in Greg's eyes. I don't want to drag anyone else into this pit. He was completely broken. I tried to calm him and went to my room while he sat alone in the lit hall. When I opened the window, I froze. In the open field stood the scarecrow. For a moment, my mind went blank. Perhaps it wasn't what it seemed. There must be a reason. But my eyes were fixed on the white-faced figure swaying on tall wooden legs, its tattered cloth fluttering in the wind. It felt like a challenge, as if it were testing my faith, courage, and reason. The only way to end it was to go out and see for myself. But how? If Greg found my room empty, he would panic. I quietly locked the door, returned to the window, and looked outside. For a moment, everything seemed to swirl around me, then suddenly froze like a photograph. The field was empty. I climbed out the window. This was for me alone. I wanted to see for myself. In the moonlight, I stepped outside. Whether it was fear or something else, I don't know, but now Greg's words about something hovering here began to grip me. A black fog surrounded the mansion. I took a step forward, then looked back over my shoulder. Something was behind me, shapeless, colorless, formless, but real. I circled the mansion and saw nothing, but when I returned to the window, my jaw was clenched, fists tight, body drenched in sweat. I had only walked 150 meters, yet felt as if I'd run miles exhausted. I slumped into a chair and dozed off. When I woke suddenly and went to close the window, I froze again. The scarecrow was back in the field. Stranger still, it had changed. Earlier, its left arm was stretched toward me. Now it was the right arm. Smiling faintly, I shut the window and turned off the lights. The fear was gone. I realized now that it had no real power. It was just a form meant to frighten, nothing more than a poisonous emotion. Still, throughout the night, I heard rustling outside, felt heavy fingers testing the window, even glimpsed a strange face trying to peer through the glass. Maybe it was illusion, maybe a dream, but I knew there was no real danger. By morning, the cool breeze entered my room, and the memory of what I'd done in the night shook me. I decided to leave after coffee. I told Greg, living here is ruining you. Whether there's an evil spirit or not, the fear alone is destroying your life. Leave this place. He didn't answer. His face hardened with anger, and I knew he wouldn't listen. I packed my things and left. At the gate, Greg stood like a helpless child. I waved. He waved faintly back. My gaze shifted to the barren field, empty now. No scarecrow, or maybe just not right now. I never returned, despite letters from Greg inviting me again. I had escaped once and didn't want to risk it again. Eventually, his letters stopped. Years later, I visited the village again. The mansion was repainted. A company's signboard hung at the gate. It was now an office. The manager told me Greg had been found dead here a few days earlier, heart attack, they said. The property was now owned by a trust. Nobody stayed here at night anymore. Perhaps they had no idea what had happened before. Maybe the presence was still here, maybe not. But until we know something, we don't fear it. That's life. So friends, this was today's story. How did you like it? Tell me in the comments. That's all for now. See you next time with another scary tale. Until then, thank you.